Billionaire brings lover to elite charity gala. Expectant wife arrives with a commanding tech mogul and turns every head. Chaos brewed like a storm on the horizon. Even after Evelyn West's defiant and elegant exit from the San Francisco gala and her solo welcome of her newborn son days later, serenity was fleeting. Whispers of corporate sabotage, personal vendettas, and hidden alliances clung to her every move. Meanwhile, Julian fumed in silence, weighed down by guilt and unsaid apologies, as his grip on the West-Tech legacy weakened with each passing day. And as for Giselle, her polished facade began to crack under the pressure of gossip columns and internal unrest. No one could have foreseen the intricate mess of lies and revenge that would unravel in the wake of their public downfall and private despair. Now, the real war for justice and second chances would ignite. Morning sunlight spilled through the hospital room's tall windows, bathing Evelyn's weary face in soft warmth as she held her infant, Michael James West. Only a few days old, he was a fragile symbol of resilience in the chaos that had consumed her world. Beyond the walls of her room, the press spun theories. Had Julian even come to meet his son? Would Evelyn still reside at the West family estate? And where did Damian Cole, the discreet yet influential CEO, fit into this maze of betrayal and power plays? Natalie Pierce, Evelyn's loyal confidant and longtime publicist, stood quietly at her bedside, scrolling through her phone. "You're looking better," she noted, spotting a faint flush returning to Evelyn's cheeks. Evelyn gently traced her thumb along Michael's tiny cheek. "He gives me strength," she whispered, "even when everything else is chaos." Natalie gave a knowing nod. "Julian's lawyer reached out," she said cautiously. "They're flagging possible custody issues. Seems like he wants to discuss an agreement, but they're being vague." Evelyn's eyes hardened with a flicker of pain. "Negotiate? He's barely been here since Michael was born, and now he wants to bargain for rights?" Natalie softened her tone. "It doesn't necessarily mean he'll push for a messy custody fight, just that he's opening the door." Evelyn let out a quiet breath and looked down at her sleeping baby. A courtroom battle was the last thing she wanted, especially now, but she knew Julian too well. She could already feel the subtle moves being made. "I'll deal with that later," she said, placing a gentle kiss on Michael's forehead. "Right now, I just need peace." Her phone buzzed. It was Damian Cole. She glanced at his message. "How are you and the baby holding up? Let me know if you need anything. Anytime." The warmth in his words settled over her like a soft blanket. She typed a brief reply. "Thank you. We're safe and resting." She didn't want to rely too much on Damian, but his quiet, constant support had become a lifeline in the chaos. The next day, Evelyn was discharged from the hospital. Natalie insisted on driving her back to the West Estate, while a private nurse sat in the back seat keeping an eye on Michael. The sprawling San Francisco property loomed as they pulled into the private drive. Evelyn glanced up at the familiar columns and wide windows, remembering the times she used to walk through those doors with pride, back when life had felt intact. "You sure you want to stay here?" Natalie asked gently, cutting the engine. "It's not too late to look for a more private place." Evelyn looked toward the nurse beside her. With Michael so young and her own body still recovering, the thought of moving into a new, unfamiliar space felt overwhelming. "For now, I'd rather stay put," she said. "At least I know the staff here. I trust them. I'll decide later if we need to move." Inside, the marble-floored lobby was quiet. Most of the longtime staff had lined up respectfully. Security, housekeeping, even the chef. They offered soft congratulations and warm, subdued smiles for the new arrival. Evelyn felt their empathy, their quiet loyalty, a stark contrast to Julian's absence. She made her way upstairs, Natalie carrying the baby carrier. The nursery had been recently redone, a soothing space of soft grays and blues, plush toys lining the shelves. The crib, beneath a delicate canopy, looked like a safe harbor. As she gently laid Michael down, Evelyn felt a wave of fragile comfort. "At least my child has a place of peace," she thought, "even if the rest of this home is filled with ghosts." Down the hall, Julian's office door was slightly ajar, but he was nowhere in sight. In the back of her mind, she braced for the inevitable confrontation. It came sooner than expected. The next morning, Evelyn rose early to nurse Michael and decided to walk through the rooftop garden. She hoped the morning air would soothe her before the storm of legal documents that was sure to come. As she rounded the corner near the reflecting pool, she saw Julian stepping out of his town car, briefcase in hand. He stopped, his gaze locking with hers across the rooftop terrace. Then, slowly, deliberately, he began walking toward her. Evelyn tightened her hold around Michael, instinctively shielding him. "You look well," Julian said stiffly, his hands buried in his coat pockets. His eyes flicked down to the baby. "How is he?" Evelyn looked down at Michael's peaceful face, still asleep in her arms. "He's perfect," she answered, though her throat ached from holding back everything else she wanted to say: betrayal, exhaustion. She ignored the tight knot of anger and sorrow building in her chest. "He's all I need right now." Julian nodded slowly, swallowing. "I'd like to see him," he said, more quietly. "Just privately." Evelyn studied his face. For all his failures, Julian was still Michael's father. She didn't trust him, but she also couldn't erase him. Not yet. Not for Michael. Cutting him out completely could have unintended consequences. She nodded toward a nearby bench tucked under a lattice of ivy-covered steel. "All right, but just for a few minutes. I don't want him upset." They sat in silence. Carefully, Evelyn placed the swaddled infant into Julian's arms. His fingers trembled slightly as he took the child, a flicker of something, shame, awe, crossing his face. His expression shifted, softened, with an almost reverent awe she hadn't seen in him in a long time. "He looks like you," he murmured. The silence between them stretched, heavy but not entirely hostile. Julian gently rocked Michael, then cleared his throat. "I need to apologize," he said, voice unsteady. "Things spiraled. I didn't mean to hurt the company or you. I lost control." Evelyn's nails dug into her palm. The apology sounded rehearsed, but the crack in his voice gave her pause. Her heart pounded harder in her chest. "If you're really sorry," she said calmly, "then do what's right for Michael. End these ridiculous headlines. Stop letting Giselle drag everything into chaos." Julian's grip tightened around the baby. "Giselle's not the source of every problem," he said defensively. "She's complicated, yes, but I can handle her." "You can't even handle yourself," Evelyn snapped, her voice low but cutting. "While you were playing house with a walking PR disaster, I was bleeding in a hospital room, alone." A bitter laugh nearly slipped from Evelyn's lips. "You've already lost half the board's confidence. Your name is tied more to scandals and club fights than anything philanthropic. If you really care..." "I'm here, aren't I?" Julian snapped, raising a hand. "I'm trying to make things right." Evelyn watched him carefully. He looked drained, the stubble on his face betraying sleepless nights. She saw it then. The war inside him. A man torn between regret and pride, between damage done and damage yet to come. Maybe he truly regretted it all. Or maybe this was just another tactic. Michael stirred. Instinctively, Evelyn reached to reclaim him, holding her son protectively to her chest. "Whether you mean it or not," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I'm not letting you drag Michael down with you. I'm giving you a chance to be his father. Don't ruin it." Julian's jaw clenched. His eyes darkened with restrained frustration, but he said nothing more. With a sharp nod, he stood and walked away, leaving Evelyn alone in the quiet morning air. She closed her eyes, her arms wrapped tightly around Michael, wondering just how sincere Julian's remorse truly was, and how long it might last. Back inside, Evelyn found Natalie sitting in the living room, scrolling through her tablet. "You won't believe the latest on Giselle," Natalie said, her eyes wide as she scrolled through news updates on her tablet. "Reports say she got into another fight, this time at a members-only club. Apparently, she's been blacklisted from a bunch of high society events." Evelyn sank onto the couch. Michael nestled in her arms. "How does Julian not see the disaster she is?" Natalie shrugged, the frustration written across her face. "He probably thinks he can control her. But from what I've gathered, her true colors are starting to show. And it's not just the partying anymore. Rumor is she's been quietly messaging wealthy men, hinting she's open to moving on as long as the offer is right." Evelyn mulled over the information. Part of her felt a grim sense of vindication. Giselle might finally be reaping the fallout of her arrogance. But another part of her worried. If Giselle self-destructed, she could try to drag Julian, and by extension the West Foundation, down with her. "Keep an eye on it," Evelyn told Natalie. "The last thing we need is another scandal." In the meantime, I'll focus on securing the foundation's finances. We need to insulate it from Julian's chaos. Natalie nodded. That's smart. Actually, 2 donors have already asked if you'd be willing to handle their contributions independently from Julian's accounts. Evelyn's brows lifted. Really? Natalie gave a half smile. It means they trust your leadership, but it could also trigger conflict. Julian might think you're cutting him out. Evelyn gently stroked Michael's tiny hand, her mind drifting to the philanthropic empire she had poured herself into, how deeply she valued the work, the mission. He can pick that fight if he wants, she said quietly, but I won't let him ruin everything just to soothe his ego. The following week, a mountain of legal paperwork hit the estate. Julian's attorney, a sleek, silver-haired man with razor-sharp eyes, showed up unannounced. Evelyn insisted Natalie stay present, along with her own lawyer, Catherine Choi, a sharp-witted strategist who had helped structure the West Foundation's biggest deals. They gathered in the formal library, its walls lined with dark walnut shelves that once symbolized Julian's aspirations. Now the space felt like a mausoleum of broken vows. Julian's lawyer slid a thick envelope across the table. We're proposing a formal custody agreement, he said, his tone smooth, rehearsed. Mr. West is requesting partial custody, weekends at minimum, and a rotating schedule for holidays. Her heart pounded. He's barely been around Michael since he was born. Evelyn stated firmly. And what about the environment he's planning to take him into? Giselle's outbursts, the paparazzi camping on their doorstep, none of that is safe for a newborn. Julian's attorney gave a tight, polished smile. My client will ensure the child's well-being at all times. Any negative media involving Miss Thorne is speculative at best. Catherine, Evelyn's attorney, responded smoothly. My client's priority is to shield her son from instability and public spectacle, especially at such a vulnerable age. We're proposing supervised visits, she continued, until Mr. West can demonstrate a stable home life. The room stiffened with tension. Julian's lawyer leaned forward, folding his hands together. That would be humiliating to my client. It paints him as an unfit father. Evelyn's eyes flared. He hasn't shown me anything to prove otherwise. I'm not trying to keep him from Michael, but I won't risk my son's safety or peace of mind. The negotiation went back and forth, voices calm but edged. After lengthy discussion, they landed on a temporary agreement. Julian could visit Michael at the West estate, under Evelyn's supervision. They would revisit the terms once the baby was older. Julian's attorney left with a curt nod, warning that a more formal legal challenge might follow if Evelyn refused to compromise in the future. Once the room was quiet again, Evelyn sank into the nearest chair, eyes shut, utterly drained. I never wanted this, she murmured to Catherine and Natalie. I always thought Julian would be better. Natalie placed a comforting hand on her back. I know, but right now, it's about protecting you and Michael. Catherine stood, gathering her paperwork. I'll file everything in court. In the meantime, be cautious. Julian may escalate things. While Evelyn grappled with custody negotiations, Damien Cole made discreet outreach to the West Foundation. One quiet afternoon, Evelyn received a call from him directly. Evelyn, he said, warmth in his voice, how are you and the little one holding up? We're managing, she replied, a soft smile creeping in despite the exhaustion. Michael's a handful, but every moment matters. I'm glad, Damien said sincerely. Actually, I wanted to talk about a potential partnership. My board at Cole Innovations is preparing to launch a line of pediatric medical software. If we partner with the West Foundation, we could scale these services dramatically. Evelyn's heart lifted. The vision he was describing, reaching underserved children with cutting-edge care, was the kind of work that reminded her why she fought so hard to protect the foundation. That sounds incredible, Evelyn said, her voice steady but cautious. But we have to move carefully. Julian still technically holds some authority over the foundation. If he thinks I'm making big moves without his involvement, it could trigger legal or financial pushback. Damien paused. I understand. Maybe I can arrange a meeting with both of you. I'll focus on the mission of the foundation. That way, he won't feel excluded. Evelyn's stomach tensed. The thought of sitting across from Julian again, of pretending things were normal while resentment simmered beneath the surface, felt like walking a tightrope over glass. The idea of a joint meeting with Julian tugged at Evelyn's nerves, but the potential benefits were too important to ignore. "Set it up," she agreed, forcing the words past the knot in her throat. "I'll do my best to keep things professional." The next day, a meeting was arranged at Cole Innovations' sleek headquarters in downtown San Francisco. When Evelyn arrived with Natalie, she found Julian already seated in a glass-walled conference room, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the table. Giselle was notably absent, a small relief. Damien greeted them with calm, polished professionalism. He launched into a detailed presentation of the new pediatric medical platform, highlighting how a partnership with the West Foundation could revolutionize access to children's healthcare services. As he spoke, Evelyn's eyes brightened. It was more than numbers and charts. It was hope. A rare, concrete way to make a difference. A legacy she could believe in. Julian remained mostly silent throughout the presentation, but each time Damien addressed Evelyn directly, Julian's jaw visibly tightened. His eyes narrowed slightly, unreadable, but full of quiet calculation. Finally, during the Q&A portion, Julian broke his silence. "So, what exactly are you proposing?" he asked coolly. "A full merger of philanthropic efforts? Or do you just want to use our name for PR?" Damien didn't flinch. "This is a genuine collaboration. The West Foundation's reach is significant, and I believe in Evelyn's vision. This synergy would benefit everyone involved." A beat of tension passed. The word vision seemed to hang in the air, vibrating between them like a fault line. Evelyn felt a flicker of defiance. "My vision, something Julian once supported, but had slowly dismissed over time. This could restore trust in the foundation," she added, keeping her tone diplomatic. "It shows donors were evolving, that were thinking forward." Julian looked at her for a beat. "I'll think about it," he said shortly. "I want time to review the documents." He stood, gathered his papers, and exited the room with only a terse nod. Damien and Evelyn exchanged uncertain glances. Even Natalie looked puzzled. The air still held Julian's tension, like static that hadn't discharged. The seeds of a promising partnership had been planted, but Julian's approval remained a critical, unpredictable variable. Meanwhile, as Julian clung to his illusion of control, Giselle Thorne's glamorous life began to unravel. Her invitations to elite events vanished. Designers stopped sending her complimentary collections. Her designer gowns stopped arriving. Even her social media sponsorships dried up, brands distancing themselves from her erratic behavior. One late evening, Giselle sat alone in her luxurious penthouse suite at a boutique hotel, staring at an untouched bottle of vintage champagne. She twirled the stem of the glass between her fingers, debating whether to call a wealthy acquaintance, someone who might bail her out of the financial mess she could no longer ignore. Her phone buzzed. It was a gossip columnist she often fed tips to. "Giselle, darling," the voice purred. "Any updates on Julian? Word is he's crawling back to Evelyn now that there's a baby. Are you two even still together?" Giselle's jaw tensed. "We're fine," she lied smoothly, forcing a chirpy tone. "He's just focused on the foundation. We're planning a getaway soon." "Ooh, hope that means a private island," the columnist giggled. "Keep me in the loop, sweetie." The call ended. Giselle tossed the phone onto the velvet couch, her eyes fixed on the city lights shimmering beyond the window. She had staked everything on Julian's power, believing she'd be one half of a dazzling power couple, but now she was on the sidelines. He no longer gave her attention. Rarely stayed the night. Always citing foundation work or the backlash in the press. A fury took hold of her. Evelyn took everything. His respect, his image, the future that should have been mine. Then, she thought of one final card she still held. Secrets Julian had let slip in confidence. Shady financial moves, risky alliances. At the time, he had spoken with casual bravado. But if the press caught wind of those skeletons, Julian's barely holding reputation would crumble. She hesitated. Blackmail might buy her a temporary solution, but it could also destroy any future she hoped to salvage with him. Still, doing nothing meant disappearing into irrelevance, something she refused to accept. Despite Julian's disengagement from Cole Innovations, the partnership talks continued. Damien arranged a second meeting, inviting both Julian and Evelyn to a high-profile fundraiser held at a skyscraper in San Francisco. The event targeted elite donors who could help bring the pediatric healthcare initiative to life. Evelyn arrived in a sleek black cocktail dress, her first evening out since giving birth. Her nerves fluttered, but she had left Michael in the care of the estate's most trusted nurse. Julian arrived shortly after, immaculate in a tailored navy suit. His expression was reserved. As they stood side by side, preparing to take the stage, a strange wave of nostalgia swept through Evelyn. We used to do this together, Evelyn thought. Presenting a united front used to be effortless. Now, standing beside Julian on stage, the atmosphere between them felt tight, strained. Damian Cole introduced them to the crowd as two visionary leaders united by a shared passion for children's healthcare. Evelyn caught Julian offering a polite nod during the introduction, but the subtle tension in his jaw betrayed lingering irritation, especially when it was her turn to speak. The memory of happier times briefly flashed in her mind, intensifying the sting of the present. Evelyn stepped forward and delivered her speech with quiet conviction. She spoke about the urgent need for investment in pediatric software and facilities. She painted a picture of how technology could close dangerous healthcare gaps in rural communities, how it could save lives. Her words resonated like a call to arms, every syllable laced with a promise of hope. The applause that followed was warm and sincere, a reflection of her growing credibility. In that moment, the clapping felt like a balm on her wounded pride. Julian followed with a short but effective talk focused on funding streams and operational logistics. For a moment, Evelyn glimpsed the man she used to know, confident, articulate, aligned with her vision. That brief flicker of the past made her heart ache with both longing and regret. They mingled with donors, shook hands, accepted pledges. They even posed for a joint photo with Damian. By the end of the evening, the initiative had drawn significant attention and a promising preliminary donation. Yet beneath the surface, unresolved tensions and old wounds simmered. As they left the venue together, Evelyn slowed her steps near the elevator. "We worked well tonight," she said, keeping her voice careful, neutral. "This is what it could be like, if you focused on the foundation and your family, not the rest of it." Julian pressed his lips together, uncertain. "I admit, it felt right," he said quietly, "but I can't just fix everything with a snap." "What's broken?" "Sienna," Evelyn interrupted, her shoulders stiffening. "How long will you let her dominate your life? Can't you see what it's costing you?" Her words cut sharply, laden with years of suppressed pain. He didn't answer. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside in silence. Evelyn clutched her evening bag, emotions swirling in her chest. Maybe there's still a sliver of hope for him, she thought. But only if he decides to take it. Her gaze lingered on his departing figure, silently praying for change. As the collaboration gained momentum, Evelyn and Julian's public dynamic evolved. They maintained a composed professional rapport at events. But behind closed doors, tension lingered, especially when the topic drifted to Giselle or the custody agreement. Late-night conversations were filled with unsaid words and heavy silences. Evelyn allowed Julian supervised visits with Michael twice a week. Either Natalie Pierce or a trusted member of the estate staff was always present. Despite the guarded structure, Julian appeared committed. He brought little toys, rocked Michael to sleep, and sat quietly during fussy spells. In those tender moments, a quiet transformation stirred within him. "Maybe fatherhood's changing him," Natalie said one afternoon, watching from a window as Julian left the building, head bowed slightly. He had just spent nearly an hour soothing Michael through a difficult bout of colic. "He seems more present lately," Natalie observed quietly. Evelyn gave a small shrug. "He's behaving better," she admitted, but her voice lacked conviction, as if she didn't dare believe the change was real. "But that doesn't erase the damage he's done, or what Giselle could still do." And indeed, Giselle's shadow loomed larger each day. Rumors swirled that she'd been meeting with shady tabloid writers. Whispers circulated about her compiling damning information on the West family. Some even claimed she had contacted a foreign outlet, one willing to pay for scandal without asking questions. The thought made Evelyn nauseous. What would Giselle be willing to burn down to stay relevant? Julian, however, dismissed it every time Evelyn brought it up, brushing off the rumors as hollow threats. He wore denial like armor, thin, dented, and barely holding. Meanwhile, Damian's partnership with the West Foundation was thriving. His authenticity and financial influence calmed previously hesitant donors. Quietly, in unspoken ways, he became a source of comfort to Evelyn. His presence steadied her. The way he listened, remembered small details, made her feel seen in ways Julian never had. Though nothing romantic had sparked, her divorce from Julian was still pending, and her heart still tender. A subtle closeness grew between them, nurtured by late-night calls and thoughtful texts. Evelyn sometimes caught herself wondering, was there room in her future for something tender again? A love that didn't come with shadows? Could love bloom again someday? Far away from those reflections, Giselle made a decision. She would play her final card. On a night Julian was scheduled to visit Michael, Giselle arrived at the West Estate unannounced. She slipped through security easily, still in possession of a personal access key Julian had once given her. He had never thought to change the locks. Another careless mistake. She found him in the foyer, about to head upstairs. He froze. "Giselle, you shouldn't be here. I told you I needed space." Her heels echoed sharply on the marble floor as she approached. "Too bad," she said, folding her arms. "We need to talk." Julian glanced toward the staircase, unease flashing in his eyes. Evelyn could appear at any moment. The tension thickened, like smoke before a fire. He quickly ushered Giselle into a side sitting room, closing the door behind them. "Make it quick," he hissed. Giselle flipped her hair over one shoulder, laughing coldly. "Look at you, acting so noble, so above it all." She leaned closer, voice like a razor. "You wouldn't seem so righteous if the world knew what you've been hiding, all those shady investments you used to brag about, the hush money you handed out to keep disgruntled staff quiet." Julian's face paled. His breath caught, not from guilt, but from fear. He knew exactly what folders she was about to pull out. "Those were just business strategies," he said, voice faltering. Giselle reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. "Well," she said sweetly, "I documented everything. Signed checks, bank transfers, screenshots, even a copy of that hush contract. If the media gets their hands on this," Giselle said coolly, "your precious foundation goes up in flames. And Evelyn, she'll finally see you for the fraud you are." A surge of anger and dread knotted inside Julian. His jaw clenched. "What do you want?" he asked through gritted teeth. "Financial security," she replied flatly. "Enough to live comfortably. Keep me in the life I'm used to, or I release everything." Julian's fists tightened at his sides. The thought of giving her another cent made his blood boil. The same woman who once purred into his ear now stood before him as a loaded weapon. He resented her now deeply. But the alternative, a media storm that could destroy the West Foundation and undermine even Evelyn's efforts, was too grave to ignore. "How much?" he finally asked, his voice strained. She named a number. He recoiled. "That's absurd," he snapped. Giselle shrugged and stepped closer, voice syrupy with menace. She let her fingers graze the folder like it was a trigger, smiling as if she already owned him. "Consider it a bargain. Once I'm set up, I'll vanish. You can pretend I never existed." Julian's thoughts swirled. If he refused, the fallout could be devastating, for him, for Evelyn, and for the foundation. But if he paid her off, he'd be funding a lie that might never truly disappear. He stood frozen, shaking with fury, aware that he was backed into a corner. The walls felt like they were closing in. What neither of them realized was that Evelyn had come downstairs with Michael, hoping Julian might spend a quiet moment with their son before bedtime. Hearing voices, heated, sharp, from the side room, she paused. The words "hush money" cut through the air like a blade. Her heart stopped. She stepped closer, pressing her ear to the door with cautious urgency. Inside, Giselle's voice oozed satisfaction. "The hush contract, the offshore accounts. You think Evelyn would let this slide? Once she finds out." Evelyn's stomach turned. Hush contracts? Secret accounts? Her mind raced back to the expansion deals Julian once insisted were strategic. Had he really jeopardized everything, their foundation, their mission, with shady backdoor dealings? 1,000 images flooded her. Late-night meetings, evasive answers, quick reassurances she never quite believed. It had all been true. Her instinct was to burst into the room. But she stopped herself. Instead, she stepped back, heart hammering, and hurried through the corridor. The estate was large, with multiple private wings, but she knew where to find Natalie. Evelyn burst into Natalie's guest suite, startling her awake. She gently placed a fussing Michael into Natalie's arms. "I just overheard Giselle blackmailing Julian," she whispered, her voice shaky. "She has documents, hush money, secret deals. It's worse than we thought." Natalie's eyes flew wide open. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice shaky. Evelyn felt tears of fury rising. "I'm sure. She's threatening to expose everything unless Julian pays her off. This could destroy the foundation, Natalie." They stared at each other, the weight of what Evelyn had just overheard settling in like a lead blanket. "What are we going to do?" Natalie finally asked, gently bouncing Michael in her arms as he began to fuss. Evelyn's mind was spinning. "We need the documents," she said. "If we can confirm they're real, we can figure out our next steps. But if Julian's done anything illegal, I'm not letting the foundation go down with him. Michael's future depends on it." Natalie nodded, her face pale. "I can pull together a legal team, people we trust, but we have to move quickly. If Giselle leaks this tomorrow—" Evelyn shuddered, picturing the headlines. Her mind flashed to Christopher, his influence, his access to legal and financial resources. She hated the idea of dragging him into another mess, but there was no time to hesitate. "Contact Christopher," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "See if he can come by tomorrow morning. We need to figure this out, Natalie. I won't let Julian's mistakes destroy everything we've built." That night, Evelyn barely slept. She dozed in a chair beside Michael's crib, jolting awake at every sound. Her dreams were filled with images of betrayal, tabloid headlines screaming West Foundation collapses or Evelyn West named in scandal. She woke with tears in her eyes. By morning, Christopher arrived promptly, dressed casually in a button-down shirt, a signal that he expected a private conversation, not formal business. The seriousness in his expression deepened when he saw Evelyn's red-rimmed eyes. She led him to a quiet reading room, Natalie close behind. A hush settled over them as Evelyn began recounting what she'd overheard. Christopher's face turned grim. "So Giselle has blackmail material on Julian? Documents, hidden accounts, hush money contracts? Enough to put the foundation at risk?" Evelyn nodded. "I'm sure some of the foundation's money is tangled up in this. Julian and I always pooled resources, but I tried to keep philanthropic funds separate. If he funneled even a portion of that into shady side ventures." Christopher placed a reassuring hand over hers. "First thing we do is confirm what's real. We can't make a move until we know exactly what we're dealing with." He looked at Natalie. "Any idea if the staff noticed Giselle snooping around Julian's office?" Natalie pulled out her phone, scanning a few messages from household staff. Some of them said she's been in and out of his office constantly, going through files, but no one dared question her. None of them dared confront her. Christopher's expression darkened. "Then we need to confirm the authenticity of those documents," he said. "Evelyn, you have to confront Julian. Tell him what you know. Demand the truth. We can't take the next step without it." A wave of anxiety twisted in Evelyn's stomach. The thought of confronting Julian about deception on this scale made her breath shallow. But for Michael's future, for the survival of the West Foundation, she would face it. "I'll do it," she whispered. "No more secrets." That evening she found Julian alone in his study, hunched over a half-empty glass of whiskey. The room reeked of leather and tension. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, heart hammering in her chest. He looked up, guarded. "We need to talk," she said, moving toward him. He finished his drink, sighing slowly. "About what?" "The hush money, the blackmail, the secret deals you tried to keep from me," she said, voice unsteady but firm. "I overheard Giselle threatening you. You've put everything at risk." A flash of shock crossed Julian's face, quickly replaced by anger. "You were eavesdropping? You did this to yourself," Evelyn shot back, her voice quivering with years of bottled fury. "I gave up so much for our marriage, for the foundation, and now you could destroy it all." He set the glass down with a thud, rising from his chair. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered. "It started as a way to boost our profile. A few gray areas. Then Giselle got involved." "Stop blaming her," Evelyn interrupted sharply. "You let her in. You gave her access." He turned his head, jaw clenched. "Yes, I did. And now she wants money to stay silent." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "I can't let you drag the foundation into criminal waters. If you've done anything illegal, Julian, you need to come clean, before she does." He slumped slightly, the weight of her words hitting hard. "I never meant to hurt you, or the foundation," he said quietly. I wanted to be bigger, more powerful. I wanted to beat guys like Christopher. But it spiraled." She drew in a steady breath. "You have one shot to fix this. Hand over everything, every document, every detail. If we can isolate the wrongdoing, maybe the foundation can be saved." She paused, voice calm but uncompromising. "You may face consequences, Julian, but at least the mission won't collapse with you." He stared at her, caught between self-preservation and panic. "Do you really think you can salvage what's left?" Evelyn's voice hardened. "With or without you, I will. For Michael." Julian swallowed. "I'll gather the files, but if I do, you have to promise you won't feed me to the wolves." She hesitated, the war between conscience and rage playing out in her chest. "I'll do what's right," she said evenly, "but I'm not protecting you from the consequences of your actions." The next morning, Julian called Evelyn to his study. Papers were scattered across his desk, loose sheets, USB drives, bank printouts. His eyes were bloodshot from a sleepless night. "I pulled together everything I could," he said flatly. "Some of it's borderline, shell companies, questionable donations. Others, maybe outright illegal. I was chasing growth fast. Giselle knows bits and pieces." Evelyn's stomach nodded as she sifted through the documents, wire transfers, obscure consultancy invoices. Several trails hinted that some of the West Foundation's funds had been funneled, masked by fake administrative costs. "This is worse than I thought," she murmured. Natalie and Christopher joined them, each reviewing the material meticulously. Christopher's brows drew together as he examined a series of flag transactions. "If these are donor funds redirected into private ventures," he said grimly, "you're staring down serious fraud charges." Julian sank into his chair, fiddling nervously with his cufflinks. "I know that now. I'll do what I can to fix it. But Giselle still has her copies, and she could leak them at any time." Natalie looked up from a spreadsheet. "If we go public first, admit the mistakes, and promise full transparency, her leverage weakens." Evelyn chewed her lip. "But that also means public humiliation. The Foundation's name. My name." Christopher placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Transparency might be the only way to protect the Foundation long term. If we frame it as internal mismanagement, you're now correcting, it positions you as a responsible leader. Julian," he added, "you'll still take the fall, but you'll be taking responsibility too." Julian exhaled shakily. "I'll do it. I can't let everything fall apart." He looked at Evelyn. "For Michael," she gave a short, firm nod. "We'll plan a press conference, full disclosure, immediate corrective steps. After that, Giselle's threat means nothing." They spent the rest of the day drafting statements, preparing for media fallout, and outlining key talking points. Diana Nguyen, Evelyn's lawyer, joined by speakerphone. Diana continued to guide them through legal risks and implications, and by the end of the day, they had a plan. Risky, but potentially their only path forward. Yet reality rarely obeys even the best-laid plans. The very next evening, as the group finalized details for the press conference, a scathing article exploded onto a major gossip site. It exposed fragments of the West Foundation's questionable financial history, just enough to ignite scandal, but not enough to reveal the full truth. The source was listed as an anonymous insider, but the tone, the phrasing, it reeked of Giselle. Each word felt sharpened with intent. It wasn't just exposure, it was vengeance, dressed in clickbait. Phones lit up in a frenzy. Donors called in a panic. Journalists demanded interviews. Social media churned with suspicion and outrage. Had charitable donations been misused? Was Evelyn complicit? Evelyn felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she stared at the article on her phone. The ground beneath her seemed to tilt. All the careful planning, the restraint, it had all been one step too late. "She beat us to it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But only halfway. We still have a chance to own the narrative, if we act now." Diana, still on speakerphone, agreed. "You have to go fully transparent, immediately. Otherwise, it looks like you're reacting to the leak, not leading with accountability." With the pressure mounting, Julian and Evelyn hastily organized a press conference at the West Estate. News crews filled the gated driveway. Staff moved quickly, assembling a podium in the marble entryway. Security tightened around the perimeter. Photographers swarmed the gate. Drones hovered outside the windows. For Evelyn, it felt like déjà vu. A flashback to the earlier press conference, when she had tried to distance the foundation from Julian's personal controversies. But now the stakes were 10 times higher. Now her own name was on the line, her credibility, her cause. As the late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the polished floor, Evelyn stepped to the podium. Natalie, Christopher, and Diana flanked her. Julian lingered slightly behind, shoulders tense and drawn. His posture slumped, not from shame but from the weight of everything unraveling at once. Dozens of reporters called out questions. Camera flashes burst like strobe lights. The room buzzed with barely contained chaos. Is Evelyn West resigning? Did she authorize the wire transfers? Was the foundation a front? Taking a breath, Evelyn began, voice trembling but steady. I've called this press conference to address the recent allegations concerning the West Foundation's financial integrity, she said. We have uncovered evidence of misconduct tied to certain investments linked to the foundation. She paused, steadying herself. Her gaze swept the crowd, not looking for sympathy, but to hold their attention, to command truth back from speculation. We are committed to complete transparency and to taking corrective action. An independent audit will begin immediately. Donor contributions will be protected and moved into secure, segregated accounts. A flurry of camera flashes followed as she stepped aside and Julian walked to the microphone. He looked pale, rattled. He clutched the sides of the podium like it might steady him against a tide only he had unleashed. I take responsibility, he said, his voice hoarse. I was the one who pushed those investments forward. My ambition clouded my judgment. Evelyn had no part in it. He looked out at the reporters. The foundation's mission stands. I accept the consequences. A barrage of questions erupted from the crowd. Are you resigning, Mr. West? Is Evelyn filing for divorce? What role did Giselle Val play in all this? Reporters' questions came fast and sharp. Julian raised a hand for silence. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down from all leadership roles within the West Foundation, he announced. Miss West will assume sole operational control, pending a full investigation. As for our marriage, that remains a private matter, but our mutual focus is on the well-being of our infant son, and Giselle Val holds no official standing within the foundation. A storm of follow-up questions erupted, but Diana quickly ushered them away from the podium. They rushed back inside, hearts racing. Diana offered a tense smile. You delivered the message. Now we let the public and media do what they will. Evelyn collapsed into a chair, her head spinning as the adrenaline drained from her body. Christopher knelt beside her, concern written all over his face. You did what had to be done, he said softly. This is your chance to rebuild without his shadow looming over you. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. The truth is out, she whispered. But at what cost? Across town, Giselle watched the press conference from her penthouse, seething. She had hoped her calculated leak would force Julian into a quiet payoff, anything to avoid a major scandal. Instead, he had gone public, disowned the affair, and shouldered the blame himself. Now, her power over him had diminished. Damn him, she hissed, her wine glass trembling in her hand. She called Julian's number. It went straight to voicemail. Growling, she hurled the phone across the couch and turned her glare to the television. Fine. If he wants war, I'll drag him deeper into the mud. She began firing off cryptic tweets, hinting that she had more secrets to share. She even considered selling her folder of evidence to the highest bidder. But the press conference had cemented Evelyn's moral high ground, and now Giselle risked looking like a bitter ex grasping for attention. Turning back to her files, she realized something chilling. Her leverage was worthless, unless she could tie Evelyn to the mess. If I can twist this, make it look like Evelyn was involved, she thought darkly. Then I'm not done yet. She started digging, hunting for anything. Emails, financial records, names that could implicate Evelyn as a co-conspirator. Days after the press conference, Evelyn faced a wave of media requests and concerned donors. Yet despite the harsh headlines, many within philanthropic circles praised her for her honesty and courage. Several donors even doubled their pledges, citing her strength in crisis. Phoenix Global Tech renewed their partnership proposal, issuing a public statement. We support the West Foundation's mission and commend Evelyn West for her transparency and leadership. Our mission remains unchanged, Christopher said in a public statement. We have full confidence in Evelyn West's leadership to guide this initiative with integrity and compassion. Behind the scenes, Julian kept a low profile, retreating to a guest wing in the West estate. He spent most days buried in legal documents, signing resignations from various boards, bracing for the possibility of lawsuits. Each signature was a quiet admission of guilt, each page a reminder of how far he'd fallen. For the first time in a long while, he was quiet, almost humble. When he visited Jace, his demeanor shifted further. He approached Evelyn with a kind of subdued respect. One afternoon, she found him in the nursery, softly humming a lullaby while cradling their son. Despite the betrayal, despite the mess he'd created, something about the image, a father gently rocking his child, stirred something in her. A flicker of the hope she once held. She stood silently in the doorway for a moment too long, wondering what might have been in another life, another version of him. But then she reminded herself, sympathy is not forgiveness, and trust must be earned, not granted. Meanwhile, Giselle's hunt for anything incriminating finally unearthed an old email thread from months earlier. In it, Evelyn's name was briefly mentioned in relation to a philanthropic proposal. Giselle smirked. Could I spin this? She thought. Make it seem like Evelyn knew? Approved the shady dealings? Her fingers itched to twist the truth, bend it into something sharp enough to cut through Evelyn's rising reputation. She decided to try. She forwarded the email to a notorious gossip blogger, adding a fabricated quote from a so-called insider, claiming Evelyn West was fully aware of the hush funds and had personally authorized them. Using a burner email, she sent it off, hoping to reignite public suspicion. Her message was laced with venom and desperation, a final attempt to crawl back into relevance through someone else's ruin. If I can't extort Julian anymore, she fumed, I'll ruin the woman he hides behind. The blogger didn't hesitate. The next morning, headlines blazed. Leaked email suggests Evelyn West's involvement in foundation fraud. Social media erupted. Was Evelyn truly innocent, or just skilled at covering her tracks? Comments poured in, dissecting every move she'd made in the last year. Every photo, every speech, every donation. The court of public opinion sharpened its knives. Christopher called her the moment the article hit. We both know it's fake, he said calmly. But the public doesn't. We need to respond, fast. Natalie, scrolling the article beside Evelyn, sighed. This has Giselle's fingerprints all over it. She's doubling down. Evelyn closed her eyes, her mind flashing back to the hundreds of legitimate emails she had written, each focused on ethical giving, accountability, and transparency. She had never authorized illegal funds. But now her name was caught in the undertow of someone else's recklessness. But nuance rarely mattered once doubts spread. We need to release proof, she said firmly. We have internal logs, official memos. Diana can vouch that I never touched or approved anything resembling hush money. They acted quickly, releasing a detailed rebuttal, backed by time-stamped internal correspondence. The documents showed Evelyn consistently advocating for transparency and tight oversight. Julian, for once, stepped up with a public statement of his own. Evelyn West was never involved in or aware of any unethical financial activity. All decisions regarding those accounts were mine alone. The blogger faced potential legal action if the claims weren't retracted. Confronted with mounting evidence, they quickly backpedaled, updating the story to reflect the allegations as unverified. Though the firestorm began to die down, Evelyn's nerves remained on edge. Giselle won't stop, she muttered to Natalie. Not until she's destroyed everything, or squeezed out one final payoff. But Giselle's usual weapons were failing her. Julian had cut her off completely. She was blocked from the West estate. The fabricated scandal around Evelyn had fizzled. Desperate, Giselle stormed into the lobby of Stratos Tech one afternoon, determined to confront Christopher directly, hoping to shake loose some hush money, or at the very least, stir more trouble. She claimed she had explosive information on both Julian and Evelyn. Security prepared to remove her, but when Christopher heard her name, he chose to meet her in a private conference room. Giselle sauntered in, flipping her hair confidently. I have evidence, she announced, eyes gleaming. Enough to ruin Julian, and maybe Evelyn too, if you don't help me. Christopher folded his arms. I'm already aware of your smear campaign against Evelyn, he said calmly. It's baseless. And if you truly have concerns, you're welcome to speak to our legal counsel. Giselle's demeanor shifted. She pouted. Come on, Christopher. Don't you want to protect her? If you don't pay me, who knows what the press might run with next? His expression hardened. You've underestimated Evelyn. She already survived one fabricated scandal, and I won't be extorted. Leave, Miss Leclerc, before we involve law enforcement. Giselle's mouth dropped open, her confidence unraveling. Security stepped in, and Christopher coolly nodded for them to escort her out. As she was led through the sleek glass lobby, curious employees turned to watch the once famous socialite being removed without ceremony. Rage flared in her eyes, but beneath it shimmered something worse. Desperation. She was out of options. In the weeks that followed, Julian began accepting his new reality. Legal mediation loomed, but with Evelyn's team firmly managing the West Foundation, donor confidence was steady. Christopher's pediatric software initiative moved forward, and Evelyn quietly became a symbol of strength and integrity within philanthropic circles. One quiet evening, Julian found Evelyn in the estate's small library, reading softly to a sleepy Jace. The room glowed under the amber lamp, shadows dancing gently on the walls. He approached, clearing his throat. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Yes? He took a seat across from her, voice low. I'm signing the divorce papers, he said. I brought them. Evelyn's heart squeezed. She had anticipated this moment for months, yet hearing the words still cut deep. It still felt like a punch to the chest. All right, Evelyn managed. I think it's time. Julian nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. I'll provide child support. I want to stay part of Jace's life, though I know you have every reason to keep me away, but I promise I'll try to be better. She let out a slow breath, nodding. He deserves a father who puts him first. Prove it. The words hung in the space between them, part challenge, part plea. For a second it felt like time folded in, bringing back echoes of the life they once tried to build. But that chapter was closed. Wordlessly, they exchanged one last look, the weight of a shared past pressing in. Within that silence, there was regret, sadness, and maybe the faintest trace of release. Then, with a quiet rustle, Julian placed the signed divorce documents on a side table and quietly exited the room. Evelyn stood still, her breath caught in her throat. Only when the door clicked shut did she let the tears fall. Silent, swift, private. It wasn't just an end. It was an exhale she'd been holding for years. Days blurred into weeks. The legal end of Evelyn's marriage became little more than a quiet footnote, overshadowed by the highly successful launch of the West Heart Pediatric Initiative. With Christopher's support, new pediatric centers were being developed in underserved communities, each equipped with state-of-the-art software designed to transform children's health care. At the West Estate, Evelyn no longer missed Julian. She had moved out of the master suite and into a smaller, sunlit guest room, one that felt wholly her own. There were no ghosts in this room, only fresh beginnings and the sound of Jace's morning giggles. She threw herself into the foundation's operations, traveling frequently to meet with donors and hospital partners. Through it all, Jace flourished, loved, protected, and blissfully unaware of the chaos he had once been born into. Christopher visited often, always, of course, under the guise of foundation business. But over time, their conversations drifted further from boardroom agendas and deeper into personal reflections, punctuated with gentle laughter and quiet moments of connection. He didn't try to fix her. He just showed up. And that, somehow, was everything. Still, Evelyn remained careful. Heartbreak had taught her restraint. And yet, she couldn't ignore the gentle pull between them. One late afternoon, after wrapping up a major donor meeting, Christopher lingered in the estate's garden. He watched as Evelyn cradled Jace in her arms, smiling at the child's infectious laughter. You know, Christopher said softly, I admire your strength. You faced scandal, betrayal, and still found a way to give everything to your son and to this foundation. Evelyn turned toward him, a soft smile on her lips. I didn't do it alone. I had help, from Natalie, the staff, and from you. He stepped closer, something unspoken glowing in his gaze. I'll always be here. If you need me, he said, voice calm and sincere. No pressure, no expectations, just support. Evelyn met his eyes, gratitude blooming in her chest. In the stillness of the garden, beneath the soft rustle of leaves, the possibility of love, genuine and unburdened, shimmered gently in the air. Thank you, Christopher, she whispered. Jace babbled in her arms, as if echoing her sentiment. They both laughed softly, a shared hope flickering between them, the promise of better tomorrows, built on honesty and grace. And in the aftermath of it all, one question lingered. What became of Giselle Leclerc? For a time, she disappeared. Giselle Leclerc slipped from the public eye. Eventually, tabloids reported her abrupt move to Europe, allegedly in pursuit of wealthy patrons who might finance her extravagant lifestyle. Rumors circulated that she attempted to sell her blackmail material overseas, but with Julian's public confession, the documents were worthless. Potential benefactors saw her not as a glamorous insider, but as a dangerous liability. Her former allure had dulled. Her reputation preceded her. Reports trickled in of Giselle drifting between upscale clubs only to be ejected for causing scenes. She burned through her remaining savings in weeks. Then came the final blow. An Italian gossip column revealed that her name had been added to a private blacklist, an undesirable persons registry shared among elite resorts. Banned for life. The same cunning that once elevated her now rendered her persona non grata in the world she once ruled. Karma had come, swift and brutal. Months passed. The West Estate slowly transformed, no longer a monument to ego, but a home for purposeful giving. Evelyn officially moved into a modest yet elegant house near the Foundation's headquarters, though she retained partial ownership of the estate for fundraising galas and staff housing. Julian continued living in a smaller private wing. He and Evelyn maintained a quiet agreement regarding visits with Jace. Their interactions were cordial, but distant. Through therapy and self-reflection, Evelyn began to heal. She unearthed a version of herself she hadn't known existed, resilient, capable, fiercely protective. The nights no longer echoed with ghosts of lost love, but with the quiet hum of new dreams. In her solitude, she sometimes thought, sometimes you must lose everything you thought you needed to discover the life you were meant to live. Christopher's pediatric software initiative launched in 3 hospitals. The impact was profound. Reduced wait times, improved record tracking, fewer medication errors. Families from underserved communities wept with gratitude for the technology and care they never thought they'd access. Overseeing the Foundation's philanthropic division, Evelyn stood proud. Every time a child's life was changed, she thought back to that night, pregnant and humiliated, when she walked into that first gala, unsure if she'd be accepted, but unwilling to back down. I never imagined it would lead me here, she often reflected. Her bond with Christopher deepened. One evening after a long day of hospital visits, they shared dinner at Evelyn's new home. Jace slept soundly in the next room, lulled by the soft hum of the AC. As she cleared the plates, Christopher approached and gently slid an arm around her waist. "You've built something extraordinary," he said, voice low and full of awe. Evelyn turned toward him, a soft smile playing on her lips. No words were needed. In his gaze, she saw not the shadow of her past, but the light of everything yet to come. Quietly, the scandal, the heartbreak, all of it had tested her. But Evelyn had emerged stronger. "I admire that more than words can say," Christopher said softly. She looked up at him, tears threatening to form in her eyes. "I learned to survive," she whispered. "Because of Jace. Because of the people who believed in me." She paused, heart fluttering. "Because of you too." In the stillness of that moment, they shared a kiss. Gentle, unhurried. A kiss not born of fantasy, but of mutual respect and hard-earned trust. No flashing cameras, no paparazzi. Just a quiet, honest connection. A promise of what might be. And for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't flinch at the idea of what's next. She welcomed it. In the years that followed, the West Heart Pediatric Initiative became a global model for charitable healthcare. Evelyn West's name graced the pages of respected publications, celebrated for her resilience and her brilliance in philanthropic innovation. She was no longer defined by scandal. She was defined by impact. Julian quietly began rebuilding his career, without the reckless ambition that once consumed him. Though he sometimes struggled with Evelyn's new relationship, he placed Jace's happiness above his pride, a late but meaningful sign of growth. He still carried regret, but it no longer guided his choices. Jace did. In hushed corners of philanthropic circles, people marveled at Evelyn's rise, the betrayed wife who had been humiliated on a public stage, only to rise from the ashes and change the world for children in need. But for Evelyn, it was never about redemption headlines. It was about the countless children who now had access to life-saving care, about building a future without secrets, about standing tall as a mother and as a leader. As for Giselle Leclerc, her stardom faded as quickly as it had ignited. Occasional tabloid whispers hinted at schemes, reality TV auditions, and scandalous liaisons with lesser-known socialites. But she never reclaimed the spotlight she had once basked in. Her name became shorthand for cautionary ruin, the price of ego without purpose. She became a cautionary tale, proof that deception might bring temporary glory, but never lasting legacy. In Evelyn, she could finally breathe. The West estate that had once felt like a golden prison no longer confined her. In her new home, she rocked Jace in a cozy chair, thinking back on the maze of betrayal, heartbreak, and transformation. The past was a scar, permanent, but no longer painful. A mark of survival, not of shame. She had built a future on truth, strength, and compassion. And that, she realized, was the ultimate revenge against those who once tried to shatter her. And so ends the whirlwind tale that began with a scandalous gala, a fractured marriage, and a woman forced to find her voice. Through betrayal and grief, Evelyn found her power. She rose beyond deception to build a legacy of hope. For children, for families, for herself. Julian learned at last that love means putting someone else first. Giselle, once sure of her manipulations, faded into irrelevance. And from the ruins, a new love quietly bloomed for Evelyn, one rooted in respect, generosity, and the possibility of brighter days. If this story of resilience, love, and redemption touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe to the channel. Your support brings more powerful stories to life, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, light always finds a way. Thank you for joining the journey. Or was it truly the end? 1 week later, Evelyn arrived at her foundation office early, as usual. Coffee in hand, schedule packed, mind calm, until her assistant, Nora, handed her an envelope. No return address. Someone left it at reception this morning, Nora said, frowning. Evelyn opened it absent-mindedly, expecting another proposal draft or thank you letter. But inside was a single photograph. Old, grainy, damaged at the edges, but unmistakably real. Julian, at least 10 years younger, was standing beside a man in a dark military jacket, his face completely scratched out with deep red ink. The backdrop looked like somewhere overseas: concrete, metal fencing, and shadows. On the back, scribbled in crude handwriting, "You think it's over, but you were never the target." Evelyn froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened around the photo. Who sent this? Why now? Was this blackmail, a warning, or something far more personal? And who was the man with Julian? Why was his face deliberately erased? Later that night, as Jace slept peacefully in his crib, Evelyn sat alone in her study, the photo still beside her. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something else, a truth that had not yet been told. Maybe you think Evelyn's story is over, but what if there's one last secret, something even she never knew? I'm not sure what will happen if no one says anything. Maybe part 3 will stay in the dark. And maybe some truths are better left hidden. So, if you want to know what happens next, if you're still curious about that photo, or if you just want to stay with Evelyn a little longer, leave a comment below. If at least 30 people speak up, I'll share a secret Evelyn was never ready to face. But if not, then maybe some stories are meant to stay buried forever. Has Evelyn truly escaped the past, or just stepped into something darker? Do you want to see part 3?